Chapter 1. The Stranger in the Pines. The last rays of sunlight bled over the jagged peaks, spilling red and gold across the timberline. Elias Kane shifted the rifle on his shoulder, boots crunching over pine needles as he made his way back toward the cabin he'd built with his own hands. The air was crisp, carrying the sharp scent of smoke from his chimney and the distant howl of a lone coyote. Solitude was a hard companion, but it was the only one he trusted. Then he heard it, a soft whimper, almost lost to the rustle of branches. Elias froze, instinct honed from years of surviving both beast and man. His hand moved slow but sure, fingers curling around the worn stock of his Winchester. He stepped toward the creek, eyes narrowed beneath the brim of his hat. There she was, collapsed on the bank as though the wilderness itself had swallowed her and spit her out. Her dress, once the bright fabric of town folk, hung torn and dirt-stained. Dark hair spilled across her face, matted with dust, and her hands clutched at the earth as though she had crawled her last mile. "Ma'am!" His voice was rough from disuse, echoing low between the pines. Her head lifted weakly. In the dying light, he caught the glimmer of fear and desperation in her eyes. She tried to push herself upright, failed, and instead whispered, breathless, "Please, don't leave me. Let me stay here, and I'll give you what no woman can." Elias stiffened. Words like that in the mouth of a stranger were dangerous things. He glanced around, half expecting ambush. But the woods held only the silence of crickets and the soft gurgle of water over stones. "You hurt?" he asked, crouching low but keeping distance, rifle steady across his knees. Her cracked lips formed a faint smile, bitter and broken. "Not hurt, just lost. Been running too long." She trembled, whether from cold or fear, he couldn't tell. The mountain night crept quick, and already a chill crawled from the creek bed. Elias's instinct said turn away. Trouble had a way of wearing dresses and speaking soft. But something about the way her shoulders sagged. The fight near drained out of her, hooked into him like a barbed spur. "Cabin's a mile yonder," he said at last, his voice reluctant. "If you can stand, I'll see you there." Her eyes widened, glistening even in the shadows. She reached out, fingers trembling, as though his offer was salvation itself. "Thank you, sir." Elias offered no reply. He only slid his arm beneath her, lifting her light weight against his chest. She smelled of sweat, dust, and something faintly sweet, like violets crushed under boot. As he carried her through the gathering dark, the pines whispered overhead, and the first stars blinked awake. Elias kept his jaw tight, telling himself it was just for the night. But deep inside, he knew the wilderness had just delivered more than a stranger to his door. Chapter 2. Ashes of the Past. The fire crackled low in the stone hearth, its glow chasing shadows across the rough-hewn logs of Elias Kane's cabin. The place was sparse, just a table scarred from years of use, a pair of chairs, a cot tucked in the corner, and rifles mounted on the wall. Solitude didn't ask for much. But tonight, the cabin held something it never had before, another voice, another heartbeat. The woman, Clara May, she'd said, sat wrapped in one of Elias's old wool blankets, the gray fabric swallowing her small frame. Her eyes followed the flames as though the fire itself might burn away the memories chasing her. She had warmed up some, color returning to her cheeks, but her hands still trembled when she held the tin cup of coffee he'd poured. Elias sat across from her, elbows on the table, silent as a stone. He studied her with the same suspicion. He might give a coiled rattler. "You running from something," he finally said, voice gravel low. Her eyes flicked to his, sharp and startled, before drifting back to the fire. "I ain't running from something. I'm running from someone." She swallowed hard. "Outlaws. Dry Creek's worst." Elias leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. Dry Creek. He hadn't set foot there in years, not since the saloon brawl that left a man bleeding out on the floor. A lawless place where men with quicker guns made the rules. Clara's voice was soft but steady now, carrying the rhythm of an old song. I worked at the Golden Spur sang for the miners, cowhands, drifters. They called me pretty names, tossed coins at my feet. Her hand tightened on the cup, but I saw too much one night. Saw Jed Malvern put a bullet through a man who didn't bow quick enough. He looked right at me after. The silence that followed was heavy as smoke. Elias felt his gut tighten. He'd heard the name. Malvern's gang was spoken of in low tones, even by men who feared nothing. So you ran. She nodded, hair tumbling forward. I've been hiding in canyons, barns, anywhere I could, but they'll keep coming. Men like him don't leave loose threads. She turned her face toward Elias, eyes glistening in the firelight. If you send me away, they'll find me before sunrise. Her plea hung in the cabin, soft as a night wind that whistled through the cracks in the logs. Elias rubbed his jaw, the stubble rasping under his palm. He wasn't a savior. He wasn't a lawman. He was a man who wanted nothing but quiet, the kind the world had denied him once before. Yet here sat a woman, fragile but unyielding, asking for a piece of his solitude. "You can stay," he muttered at last, though the words felt heavy. "But you pull your weight. What needs chopping. Cabin needs keeping. I ain't running no hotel." For the first time, Clara smiled. Not the painted smile of a saloon girl, but something small, real, and tired. "I'll do whatever it takes." The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, coyotes called across the valley. Inside, the unlikeliest of bargains had just been struck, one that neither of them yet knew would change the course of their lives. Chapter 3. Sparks beneath the timberline. Morning sunlight streamed to the cabin's single window, cutting sharp bars across the wooden floor. The air smelled of coffee and pine smoke, and outside, the hammer of Elias's axe split the silence of the mountain valley. Clara May stood at the threshold, Elias's spare shirt hanging loose over her frame as she shook out a quilt she'd mended. The rhythm of his work drew her eyes, each swing of the axe precise, shoulders flexing with years of hard labor. She knew better than to stare, but she found herself caught anyway, as though the man's very presence commanded the mountain as much as it did the cabin. "You'll wear a hole in that blanket if you keep twisting so tight," Elias called without looking up, his voice carrying across the clearing. Startled, Clara let go of the fabric and folded it neatly instead, a blush heating her cheeks. "I was only making myself useful," she answered, softer than she intended. Elias set another log on the stump, the axe biting deep with a clean crack. "Useful don't mean working yourself ragged. Cabin's still standing, ain't it?" Clara almost laughed. His words were gruff, but she caught the edge of something else beneath them. Concern, maybe, though he'd never admit it. When he crossed the room to add another log, his hand brushed hers. An accident, maybe, but neither of them pulled away quick enough. The touch lingered, her fingers trembling against his calloused palm. For one breathless moment, the world outside ceased to exist. The storm, the danger, even her past. Their eyes met, the firelight painting shadows across his face. His jaw tightened, and with effort, he withdrew his hand. "You ought to get some sleep," he said roughly. Clara swallowed, her heart thundering louder than the storm. She wanted to speak, to tell him the truth of what she felt building in her chest, but the words stuck fast. Instead, she nodded and curled beneath the quilt, the sound of his boots pacing the floor long into the night. Then, just as the storm began to fade, a single gunshot rang through the valley, sharp, foreign, and close enough to freeze them both where they stood. Chapter 4. Shadows from Dry Creek. The echo of that gunshot still lingered in Elias Kane's ears the next morning. The mountains were supposed to be quiet, Just wind through pines, the distant call of hawks, maybe a coyote's mournful cry. But a gun meant men. Men meant trouble. Elias saddled his horse at first light, his jaw set hard. Clara May hovered near the cabin door, her hands gripping the frame, as if letting go might drag her back into the past she'd fled. "You think it's them?" she asked, her voice thin. "Don't matter what I think," Elias replied, cinching the saddle tight. "Best to be sure." The trail down to Miller's trading post wound along the ridgeline, dust rising in the morning sun. Elias kept his rifle across his lap as he rode, eyes sharp. He hadn't felt this edge of tension in years, and he hated how it tightened his chest. The post was busier than usual. Freighters unloading supplies, ranch hands swapping tales, a saloon girl laughing too loud, a cowboy's joke. Elias dismounted slow, spurs clinking on the warped boards of the porch. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the tang of spilled whiskey. Old Miller polished his shotgun behind the counter, glancing up with his one good eye. "You hear that shot last night?" Elias asked without preamble. Miller's mouth twitched. "Ain't just shots I've been hearing. Word is Jed Malvern's boys rode into Dry Creek. 6 of them, mean as rattlers, sniffing after a woman." Elias's gut tightened. He didn't let it show. "That's so." Before Miller could answer, the door creaked open, and 3 riders stepped in. Dusty coats, iron at their hips, eyes that scanned the room like wolves on the hunt. One of them, a scar running from temple to jaw, froze when his gaze landed on Elias. Then his lips curled in recognition. "Well, I'll be," the outlaw drawled. "If it ain't Kane," the hermit himself. "Thought you buried yourself so deep in these mountains we'd never see your face again." Elias didn't move, though every muscle coiled tight. "Reckon you've seen it now. You done staring?" The man chuckled darkly. "We're looking for a girl. Pretty thing. Dark hair, green eyes. Sang at the spur till she up and vanished." He stepped closer, boots thudding on the wooden floor. "You wouldn't happen to know where she's hiding, would you?" The room went silent. Elias could feel the weight of eyes on him, waiting for his answer. Clara's frightened face flickered through his mind. The way she trembled by the fire, the way she clung to hope when he told her she could stay. Elias's hand rested casual-like on the edge of the counter, inches from the butt of his Colt. His voice came out low and cold. "Ain't my business what women do. But if you boys aim to drag trouble into these hills, you'll find it quick." Scarface's grin faltered, his eyes narrowing. The air snapped taut as a drawn bowstring. Then it broke. Steel flashed, and the saloon filled with thunder. When the smoke cleared, 2 of Malvern's men lay bleeding on the floorboards, and Elias stood with his gun still hot in his hand, a fresh crease burning across his shoulder where a bullet had grazed. The scarred outlaw fled into the street, cursing vengeance into the dust. Elias pressed a hand to his wound, breath heavy. He knew what this meant. He'd drawn blood against Malvern's gang. There'll be no turning back now. Chapter 5, Hearts at Gunpoint. The ride back to the cabin was a blur of dust, pain, and the steady drum of Elias's heartbeat in his ears. The wound along his shoulder burned with every step of the horse, but his jaw remained clenched tight. He'd survived worse. Still, he couldn't shake the thought of the outlaw's sneer, the promise in his eyes that more men would come. Clara was waiting by the cabin when he rode in, her face pale, lips parted as she saw the dark stain spreading across his shirt. "Elias!" She rushed aside, fumbling to steady him as he swung off the saddle. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing but a scratch," he muttered, though his knees near buckled as he stepped inside. By the firelight, Clara stripped away his coat, her hands trembling as she tore the shirt to bare the wound. Blood streaked her fingers, but she pressed a rag firm against it, whispering curses under her breath. "You call this a scratch?" Her voice broke, raw with fear. "You could have been killed." Elias watched her, the crease between her brows, the way she bit her lip to hold back tears. It wasn't the wound that unsettled him. It was the way she looked at him, as if his life mattered more than her own. "Why'd you do it?" she asked suddenly, her eyes flashing up at him. "Why risk your neck for me?" He shifted, wincing as the cloth pressed against his flesh. "Wasn't about you. Those men were itching for blood. Didn't give me a choice." But even as he said it, the lie hung hollow between them. Clara knew it, and so did he. Her hands lingered on his skin, soft against the roughness of his chest. She swallowed, her voice dropping low. "I told you I'd give you what no woman could. But I wasn't talking about my body, Elias. I meant my heart. You saved me when no one else would. And her breath hitched. I care for you more than I ever thought I could." The words struck him harder than any bullet. Elias had built walls thicker than the mountains around him, but in that moment, he felt them cracking. His rough fingers closed around her wrist, holding her hand against his chest. "You don't know what you're saying," he rasped, though his eyes betrayed the... Chapter 6. A Home in the Wild. The sound of hooves shook the ground like distant thunder. Dust rose on the horizon, curling into the night as the gang rode hard for Elias Kane's cabin. Inside, the firelight flickered across Clara May's pale face as she gripped the rifle Elias pressed into her hands. "You know how to use it?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. Clara nodded, though her knuckles whitened against the stock. "I ain't afraid, not anymore." Elias's eyes softened for a heartbeat, then hardened again as the riders drew near. He blew out the lantern, plunging the cabin into shadow. Outside, the laughter of outlaws carried to the pines, cruel and sharp as broken glass. "Come on out, Kane," a voice bellowed, Jed Malvern himself. "We know she's in there. Hand her over, and maybe we'll let you keep breathing." Elias stepped onto the porch, shotgun cradled easy in his arms, his silhouette cut against the starlit sky. Clara hovered behind him, her breath quick, the rifle steady despite her fear. "You want her?" Elias called, his voice cold as mountain stone. "Come take her." The first shots cracked like lightning. The cabin shuddered under the storm of bullets, glass shattering with splintering. Elias answered with fire, dropping one man clean off his saddle. Clara leaned from the doorway, squeezing the trigger, her shot grazing another rider and sending him reeling. Gunpowder choked the air, smoke curling thick around them. Elias fought like the wilderness itself, fierce, unyielding, his shoulders screaming with each pull of the trigger. Clara stayed at his side, her fear burning into defiance. When Malvern himself stormed the porch, Colt blazing, it was Clara's rifle that barked, the shot tearing his pistol clean from his hand. Snarling, Malvern lunged, tackling Elias into the dirt. They rolled, fists flying, boots scraping against the boards. Elias's knuckles split against the outlaw's jaw, but Malvern was a brute, heavy and cruel. With a grunt, he drew a knife from his boot, steel catching the moonlight. "Elias!" Clara screamed, raising the rifle, but Elias caught Malvern's wrist, twisting with every ounce of his strength. The blade clattered free. With a final surge, Elias drove the outlaw back against the porch rail, sending him crashing over into the dust below. Malvern lay still, the fight gone out of him for good. The valley fell silent save for the groans of the wounded and the fading hoofbeats of men fleeing into the dark. The battle was done. Clara dropped the rifle, rushing to Elias as he slumped against the rail, his chest heaving. She pressed her hands to his face, tears streaking her cheeks. "Don't you dare leave me now," she whispered fiercely. He met her gaze, weary but unbroken. Wasn't planning on it. His rough hand found hers, squeezing tight. "Truth is, Clara May, you've given me what no one else ever could. A reason to live for something more than myself. At dawn, the mountains blushed gold. The cabin scarred but standing. Smoke drifted from the chimney. And in the quiet after the storm, Clara and Elias sat side by side on the porch, his arm wrapped firm around her. The wilderness stretched endless before them. But for the first time, neither of them felt lost. Clara leaned against him, her voice a whisper carried by the morning wind. Then let me stay, Elias, forever. And for the first time in years, Elias Kane smiled. Forever sounds just right. The sun sank low, spilling fire across the plains, painting the sky in streaks of crimson and gold. The battle was over. The gang scattered, their leader gone, and silence settled heavy, broken only by the soft wicker tire horses and the far-off notes of a saloon piano drifting up from Dry Creek. Elias Kane stood on the porch of his battered cabin, his hat in his hands, staring out the horizon as if weighing all he had lost and all he had found. Beside him, Clara May stepped close, her hair catching the last light like spun copper, her eyes steady despite the dust and blood on her dress. "You could have sent me away," she said softly, her voice carrying in the sage-scented wind. "But you didn't." Elias turned, rough edges softened by something fragile, something fierce. "Truth is, I couldn't. Worlds wide and wild, Clara, but it don't mean a damn thing without you in it." Her breath hitched, tears shining, and she reached for his hand. He clasped it tight, the callous grip of a man who had lived too long alone finally finding an anchor. As the last rays of daylight slipped behind the mountains, Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. "Then let me stay," she whispered. Elias's lips curved, the ghost of a smile breaking through years of silence. "Darling," he said, voice low and certain, "you already have old." The word struck him harder than any bullet. Elias had built walls thicker than the mountains around him, but in that moment he felt them cracking. His rough fingers closed around her wrist, holding her hand against his chest. "You don't know what you're saying," he rasped, though his eyes betrayed the hunger burning beneath. "Life with me ain't safe, ain't soft. You'll be looking over your shoulder till the day you die." "Then let me look over my shoulder beside you," she whispered. The camera of life pulled back. Two figures silhouetted against the burning horizon, a cabin standing strong, and a love born from dust, danger, and the untamed heart of the West.